3, 2, 1. Welcome, everybody, to a live version of the 3 Whiskey Happy Hour. We're back on Substack. We have left Zoom, left recording, and just presenting it to people after the fact. We have many, many people joining, watching live, and we're inviting comments and questions in the comments, in the live chat section. I'm John Yu, one of the co-hosts of the 3 Whiskey Happy Hour, and I'm joined by my co-hosts, Steve Hayward, who is caught in mid-quaff. Steve, what are you doing? What are you drinking there?
I'm just having my standby of Lefroy because it's Friday and it's all I have. So
Great.
You got nothing,
great.
right?
No, I've got nothing. And of course, the international woman of mystery, Lucretia. How are you? And what are you drinking?
Lucretia Person.
Lucretia,
come to
That's
that.
my new
Yeah.
name. You don't know what that refers to, John?
I think so. You're talking about the identification of the Canadian shooter.
Yes. The gun person.
Well, I also
I'm a
waiting for
Lucretia Person, gun person.
I remember when Fetterman got elected, I said, why aren't the Democrats calling him Fetter Inks?
I know.
Oh,
I know,
right.
but now he's like more solid than half the Republicans on the Senate. So
What are you
what do you
drinking,
do?
Lucretia?
Actually, I am drinking a mixture of tea, honey, lemon, and whiskey.
Oh, you're not feeling well.
Little thanks to Steve, a little bit of laryngitis this week.
It's always
You're the
my
one who got-
fault.
Yeah.
Were you yelling at?
Well, didn't you hear us
without
last
me
week's show?
around?
I was getting hoarse, during last week's show when we taped in Austin, and it only got worse over the weekend. And I had no voice in class on Monday. It was 6 hours in class on Monday.
Did anybody notice?
Well, I had some guest lecturers. I had Lynn Kiesling came to my class by Zoom last Monday, and that was great. You both saw her. Well,
Yeah.
You were the panel chair, Lucretia. Anyway, we'll come back to that. But John, look, we always have to the main news story of the week is the latest McDonald's news. A thread on Reddit, which was the $1,000 challenge. How would you spend $1,000 at McDonald's in 2 days? And somebody said they'd spend the whole $1,000 getting the ice cream machine fixed, which I thought was the best answer, right? Because they're never.
Oh, I see. That's funny.
Yeah, I thought so.
But apparently,
that's a conspiracy
it's not
for
the
you.
ice cream machine. The one that breaks down even more is the McFlurry machine.
Isn't it the same
more
thing?
Advanced version? No, that's because it does the mixing of the ice cream with other things like M&Ms and so on. So that thing apparently breaks down even more than the ice cream machine. And then, of course, there must be some kind of rare McRib machine because it's so expensive or rare. It's only brought out a few times a year.
Yeah. Well, we better bring it back soon because Bitcoin keeps plunging in price. It's having a bear market. Yeah.
But,
right.
This $1,000 over 2-day challenge, of course, it got me to thinking, what exactly would you order? So, of course, you would try to order something that had the least number of calories per dollar. So I think that's got to be something like a triple patty, Big Mac special or something like that. But I haven't been to McDonald's lately to test it out, but I'm going to this weekend. I'm going to go and see what's the most expensive things you can buy at McDonald's.
You haven't been there for a while? Are you having DTs and withdrawals?
No, I mean, I just haven't been there since I heard about this challenge. What are you talking
I see.
about?
Okay.
Of course, I've been to McDonald's recently.
Okay, good. I was worried.
Although I was going to try and stop. All my friends from Texas have been urging me because they know about my love of convenience stores to stop at something called Buc-ee's. Have you guys ever been to a Buc-ee's? But I haven't had the time, and they're not right in downtown. You have to drive out about 30 minutes. But I drove by one today, but I couldn't stop because I was rushing back to do this podcast, and it looked like a Costco-sized convenience store with like 40 gas pumps out in front. So I'm very excited to try this.
I think that Buc-ee's beats Wawa any day, John.
Oh, John,
that's fighting words.
My advice is set aside a couple of days to clear your calendar because I think once you get inside Buc-ee's, you might not leave for quite a long time.
Oh, really?
I'm not kidding. You're going to be. I can't wait to get your review of it. Buc-ee's is awesome.
One of my friends at Baylor, where I was today, a fellow named Kleineman, who's a good political scientist.
Oh, yeah, I know who he is.
Written a book about presidential power. He said, what you want to get is the beef jerky. So he said, there's so many kinds. I was like, how do you choose? And he goes, you get free tastes of jerky there. And I was like, what do you mean you actually take a piece of jerky and just take a pull and give it back? I mean, how do you get a free slice of beef jerky? Anyway, so enough about my favorite subject, convenience stores. And let's turn to the first issue. I'd like to start with Lucretia, which is the latest machinations and schemes in Washington, D.C., where I think we've seen the Congress now going on vacation without passing the SAVE Act and also not funding DHS.
Did they go on vacation?
Well,
I mean, they've gone on a kind of recess. Yeah. They've left. So DHS is going unfunded starting this weekend. Of course, this isn't applied to ICE because ICE is specially funded.
Specially funded under the big, beautiful bill.
That's right. And the rest of the government is funded. But if you remember in the budget deal, Congress decided to cut out the DHS funding part of it so that there would have to be an individual vote up or down on DHS. And as you know, the Democrats have refused to approve the DHS funding bill unless there are changes made to ICE operations, like no wearing of masks, apparently no administrative warrants, no what they're calling aggressive sweeps, whatever that means. And so you haven't been able to get agreement on the DHS funding bill. But I hear Lucretia's worried the Republicans are going to cave and agree to all of this without passing the SAVE Act. Lucretia.
So the last I heard is that they actually had 50 votes because Thune and Collins both decided to vote for it. So now all we need is for Thune to stop being the wuss that he is. And decide to hold a talking filibuster, which he can do. I don't think that they should abolish the filibuster for a whole variety of reasons, but not over this anyway. But he can do a talking filibuster and force Democrats to get out there and argue that liberal women are too stupid to be able to figure out how to get an ID that had an appropriate ID with their married name on it, because how are they going to change their birth certificates? Oh my God, these people. You don't change your birth certificate when you change your name when you get married. You take your birth certificate to the court clerk, and then you get the signed thing, and that's how you change your name. And then you go to the DMV, and they give you an ID. And it takes you 5 minutes, and it costs you $10. I mean, it's so stupid. But the problem is, so the Gora and I went back and forth on X on this, and he said this is almost as good as repealing the 19th Amendment. I said, no, the problem's going to be all those damn single liberal women who still have their maiden name unless they married their cats.
So
no, you know what?
Maybe we rush too quickly. I should explain what the SAVE Act is, which is
sorry.
The SAVE Act would be federal legislation that establishes nationwide for voting a requirement for voter ID. And what Lucretia is referring to is that this criticism or accusations that this might prove difficult for married women whose birth certificate name and driver's ID name could be different. The basic idea of the SAVE Act is to establish some minimum standards for federal elections. It also some versions of it ban universal mail-in voting, for example, as well. Steve, let me turn to you. But Steve, I thought we didn't want federal election legislation. Wasn't that the argument that Republicans made against the Democrats' H.R. 1, if you remember at the beginning of the Biden administration? The argument Republicans made is that the Constitution gives the responsibility to running elections to the states, subject to a federal override if Congress chooses to pass one, but that it had been Republicans in general that had opposed universal nationwide rules on elections. Steve, what do you think?
Well, look, that was purely political, but for all the right reasons. They wanted to override all of the red states that have tighter voting oversight, including requiring IDs, which, by the way, is wildly popular even with Democrats. I mean, CNN has a poll showing 85% of the public supports it, and 70% of Democrats, 70% of blacks. So this is just typical leftist race mongering. So, I mean, it was, in that case, of course, you don't want them to. HR 1 of the Democrats was, let's increase ways Democrats can cheat at elections. That's what that was about. So even if you repaired behind the argument that the Constitution has multiple provisions on this that are arguably contradictory, wait.
They're not contradictory. The clause says states, it basically says states determine the time, place, and manner of elections.
Right.
And it says basically, comma, except for exceptions or regulations that Congress wishes to. So Congress can always override the state rules, but the state rules are primary. And the default rules, yeah.
And
it's not a contradiction or conflict.
Go ahead.
What I want to bring up, though, is the fact that we have the 15th Amendment. I kind of want to leave the 19th Amendment out of it, but it does fall into it, sort of. The 24th Amendment, leave the 26th Amendment out too, but you could, especially the 15th Amendment and the 24th Amendment were passed because Democrats in southern states, Democrats generally speaking, wanted to corrupt our electoral process by not allowing citizens to vote. Not allowing citizens, in the case of the 15th Amendment, who are citizens now as a result of the 14th Amendment, newly freed slaves, etc. And then, of course, the 24th Amendment was designed to get rid of the many sneaky, malicious laws that Democrats passed after the 15th Amendment so that they still didn't have to give blacks the vote. And so it got rid of poll taxes, because one of the things they did was make it have an expense. You had to pay a poll tax in certain cases. So those two are examples, in my opinion, John, of the belief that it is an obligation of Congress to ensure election integrity. And I think that there's no way to argue against that's what the 15th Amendment is designed to do. It's what the 24th Amendment is designed to do. The SAVE Act is trying to do the same thing. There has been now very serious allegations with evidence down in Georgia, and to understand that they're now in my home state of Arizona, weeding out some really, again, serious allegations of voter fraud. Leave that aside. Whether it's true or not, even if it's not true that there was massive voter fraud in 20 and 24, whatever, 22 here, why not ensure that you don't have these idiot democratic states allowing illegals to vote because they let them get driver's license and do all those other things and automatically register them to vote? And supposedly everybody keeps bringing out this heritage study that says only 34 cases in the whole history of the world have ever been found of illegals voting. I don't know. I didn't read it. I don't know if any of that's true. But what I will tell you is today, 2 times today, I saw references, one to, I forget where the heck it was, back in somewhere on the East Coast, some idiot who doesn't speak English and is not a citizen was elected re-elected mayor of some stupid town. And some stupid lady in Minneapolis brags about the fact that she is an illegal alien Minnesota representative. Did she vote for herself, the moron? I mean, what the heck?
Well, those obviously would not be prohibited by the SAVE Act because they're candidates for office not voting.
Well,
no, it's fine, but you don't have to vote for herself.
But actually, the Georgia case is interesting because I think that Brad Raffensperger, the guy who was attacked by President Trump, actually claims he wrote an article in the Wall Street Journal just recently and said he conducted a audit of the electoral rolls, and I think he said he found 8 cases out of 2 million registered voters of people who are not qualified to be on the rolls. I mean, that's a tiny percentage, right? That's less than 1%. Does that justify enacting
John,
nationwide
Pay attention,
legislation
John,
that
to what's
overrides the
actually
states?
happening.
But you
look,
have yet to produce real evidence of enough fraud to change any election.
I don't know that we need
John,
to, that anybody wants to prove to change the election outcome. That's not the point. The point is to show how fraud happened so that it can't happen again. And there's lots of evidence of it.
So you must have zero
300,000
fraud.
votes in Georgia, John.
Well, wait a minute.
300,000. You're saying 300,000 votes in Georgia were fraudulently cast.
No, have questions about them.
3
ahead,
points.
Steve.
3 points, if I may. One is if there's really no fraud happening at all, then what's the problem with passing some safeguards? Because it wouldn't prevent anyone from voting. But the second one is there have been several jurisdictions, I think even New York had this at one point, where the Democrats want to allow non-citizens to vote in municipal elections.
They're allowed to. Yeah. I mean, they're not.
No, I thought they lost that in the. I thought they lost it in the courts
under their own state constitution. It's a question of state law.
But now, does it? Now, come on, common sense. You really think that you have a lot of people who thinking non-citizens should be able to vote because they'll vote for guess who? That there aren't attempts to get them onto the voting rolls and cast their votes for them. Second point is look. I mean, there's mounting evidence, although smoking gun proof is hard to assemble, of massive welfare fraud, like in Minnesota. You really think all those people in Minnesota who are giving big campaign contributions to Democrats aren't casting any votes? Come on, John. Even you are not that naive.
No, my point is that it's not that. First of all, I don't think it's possible to drive anything like this to zero. And so the question is it worth enacting nationwide federal legislation when Republicans have taken the position that we should just allow states to regulate it, like conservatives generally are in favor of states being the front line for most policy decisions?
Well, okay, I'll give you my exit proposition now, which is, Democrats love all those social democracies in England and in Europe. Denmark, Sweden, France. My proposal is let's have the same voting rules that they have. Deal? Because guess what? There are a lot tougher rules than we have. And so if they love those social democracies for all their welfare state, let's have their voting rules too. I will make that deal tomorrow. I'll make it tonight.
Okay, let's take a break. We're going to go to one of the most enticing ads ever for any podcast of any kind.
We are?
Lucretia.
Well,
yeah, I mean, we argue enough about stuff, right? Sorry.
I guess you count as a conservative sometimes, John.
Sometimes.
The kind that won't stand up for free and fair elections, but still a conservative.
I don't think anything's free or fair. That's the problem.
That's
why I'm more conservative
you're right about
than
that,
both of you.
But we should move toward that, don't you think? But since we like to disagree, and I'm not calling you any names tonight. So,
at least not in this segment.
Best behavior. Not in this segment. No, I'm trying to be on my best behavior the whole night. But if you enjoy conservatives arguing like we do, and you don't want to hear any name calling, then you should probably try out a new podcast. Try out a new podcast, Conservative Crossroads, with Henry Olson, who is the senior fellow at the Ethics and Public Policy Center. He doesn't shy away from it. His podcast doesn't shy away from these conservative disputes. They just take them head on, just like we do. They lean into them by putting at least 2 conservatives who disagree about an important issue together to hash it out on the air. Every other week, Conservative Crossroads does what no other program does: explore conservatives' disagreements without name calling. Conservative Crossroads is the podcast for conservatives who want to understand what's happening to their movement. And this is for Steve. Join Henry Olson and his guests at Conservative Crossroads every other Monday as they hash out the ideas and principles that will decide the future of the right.
The Gora is never mind. The Gora is enjoying this.
I'm amazed that the gold bar advertisers haven't called Lucretia up to do their ads too. I mean, they got that guy William Devane. He always plays the president or the Secretary of Defense.
Right.
They should have a female version in Lucretia as well. What a wonderful ad! I don't think Henry deserves it, but
good for him.
Which,
but otherwise,
before you move on, John, to the next point, since I actually answered your question you didn't ask in the first segment, we were talking about immigration, and I was already on the SAVE Act because it was first on our list. Sorry. My brain was just going in that direction. I kind of want to make a really serious point for a second, and that is that, okay, I won't call him out by name, but at our conference last week, our good friend and I had a conversation, and he's a good conservative. But he said, look, we have to back off on immigration. We have to back off on the idea that we should deport every illegal immigrant because Trump's going to lose that battle. And, it's already independents are turning away from him, et cetera, et cetera. And we should, and we're at fault as a country for allowing for so many years the unfettered illegal immigration into the country. So all of these people came in thinking that they were being welcomed, and it's not fair to kick them out. Again, good conservative on most issues. I think that this is a watershed moment. Either the United States decides that we are going to have laws, we're going to have immigration laws, we're going to have them enforced fairly but universally, or we become a nation of lawlessness. Something right out of Abraham Lincoln's Lyceum address, right? Yes. And anyway, that's my major point that I really did want to make about this, John. And I think that the SAVE Act goes along with that a little bit, but more so is this idea that we should play politics with the enforcement of our laws and decide that, something as important as our own sovereign borders can just be left up to whatever the political winds are of the moment. Ken Masugi, how nice to see you.
I'm afraid I just think it's impossible to enforce any laws 100%, and it's a policy question how much we want to devote towards, how many resources we want to devote towards enforcement. And one of the ways we decide is by giving political feedback to the executive branch. And it does seem like the polls show people think that the Trump administration has gone too far. Now, a majority of Republicans still support the enforcement levels, but Democrats, of course, heavily oppose it. But independents have turned against this level of immigration enforcement. Steve, what do you think about that? Should independents decide how much enforcement authorities get thrown into the immigration fight, or should President Trump, as Lucretia's advising, keep going forward until all the illegal aliens are removed from the country?
John. So first of all, general proposition. Independents should be relied upon to be a decisive voice in absolutely nothing, whatever the issue is. Every 4 years they have these debates where the last debate is with undecided voters. And if you ever watch those, they're always morons, right? Who's undecided 3 weeks before a national election? Morons are undecided. And they ask moronic questions.
Agreed.
And now, but the more serious point, I am serious about that. But the more serious point is, I'm kind of amazed there's as much public support as there still is in light of the media onslaught on this. Look, the media counts for a lot. They still swing public opinion 5-10 points on things. That's, Timothy Grosclose's findings and other people that I think are pretty robust. And the great thing about the Trump people is they don't give a you-know-what. And look, John, I don't think even they think we're going to deport every single person who crossed over illegally at whatever time frame. But one of the things about this that is working is, everyone thought Mitt Romney was a monster for saying we won't have to deport lots of people. Well, there'll be self-deportation. I think the ratio right now is something like 3-1. I think 3 people are leaving for every 1 person's being arrested and sent abroad. And so this is working. And I say, stay the course, just like Reagan did about the economy in 1982. And don't pay attention to the darn polls, John. That is the road to ruin. And I'll just stop there because I think Lucretia's agreeing with me furiously. Maybe I should keep going. This is a rare moment I can enjoy.
Well, I mean, first of all, I haven't paid as much attention to the polls themselves. I haven't looked into the questions and so forth. I wouldn't be surprised to find that many of them are push polls and not actually trying to find out what public opinion, public sentiment on the issue really is. But Steve's also right when he says that the media play on this has just been appalling. And you're right, of course, John. We will never have the resources to enforce every single law. We're not going to arrest every jaywalker, and I get all that. Nor are we going to prosecute every jaywalker and so on. We have limited resources, but there cannot be, in a country that claims to be a sovereign country, they cannot have open borders that allows anybody to come in, including enemies and terrorists, etc. That's a whole nother thing. But the other problem, of course, is that use Minnesota as an example. It was one thing for my grandparents and your parents to come here. They didn't come here and go on welfare, right? I mean, they didn't.
Yeah.
And they came here and they worked hard. They might have gone to a community, a diaspora of their own people where they got some help along the way for sure, but nobody expected that they would come here and just feed off the public what for the rest of their lives. And that in and of itself is so problematic, never mind the lack of assimilation and so on. We cannot tolerate this. Is one of those things we have to put resources to. And that's why Trump won in 2024, in my opinion. And we cannot just decide, okay, well, this person has been living here for 16 years, overstayed their 3-month visa, but they haven't really broken any laws, so we won't go after them. You cannot do that. It just seems to me basic.
Let's move on to another topic. Since I'm the host, I can't really
No, you shouldn't,
respond. This is so unfair.
We're not done.
Silence.
Don't worry.
Silence. I've been canceled. So topic number 2, and it just gets worse for me after this last topic, is I'm going to trigger discussion of the act which shall not be named. But perhaps what I think this probably is true. President Trump announced on Friday the reversal of something called the endangerment finding, which he said was the largest single act of deregulation in American history.
Yeah.
Steve, what is the endangerment finding? It sounds like some kind of risque musical of some kind. What is an endangerment finding, and why is it so important? And does it actually produce the greatest single act of deregulation in American history?
In reverse order, the answer is yes. But, John, you can relax. We have reached the point, for our purposes in this podcast, with certain banned statutes that reminds me of a comic novel from the 80s. It was Richard Grenier's great comic novel, The Marrakesh 1-2. And it was about a bunch of CIA officers whose cover was they were going to go to the Middle East and spy, but they were going to be making a movie about Muhammad. And they didn't realize that you can't actually.
You're not allowed to.
You're not allowed to. So that was the comic device. As the whole comic device was the entire movie, all the scenes, all the dialogue would be shooting reaction shots of people looking and listening to Muhammad. But then they learned you couldn't even have the shadow of Muhammad onto the ground, right? So I mean, it was a very funny novel. If it had been more of a bestseller, Richard Grenier, he would have gotten the fatwa instead of Salman Rushdie in the later 80s. So the point is, I can discuss this, Sean, without mentioning a certain prohibited statute that rhymes with bear, fair, or fact, or something like that. Okay. Look, this was the linchpin of nationalizing all of our energy, from the electric power grid and power plants to our automobiles and even our appliances. And the EPA did that because that statute that won't be named never did include carbon dioxide and greenhouse gases. So they had to shoehorn it in with the help of a close Supreme Court vote that you know all about. A couple things to be said about this. I've been wanting to say from the beginning of the week, endangerment Will Robinson or something goofy in the old days. But
Lost
really,
in space reference for those keeping track.
I wasn't sure you're old enough for that, John. But look, I will say this military analogy that ought to be close to home for you. This move this week by Trump is the Inchon Landing of the tax on the administrative state, right? I mean, you know the history of that from the Korean War, I assume.
Yes.
And so, first, it's unimaginable that any Republican named Bush or Romney or McCain would have ever done anything. McCain and Romney, by the way, they were totally down with the climate change hysteria, right? I won't go through their sorry record on all that. And the Bushes would never have resisted it. So, again, only Trump could go to China, or the Nixon thing, right? Only Trump would do this, and good for him. Second, and this is long and tangled, I don't want to bore people with the ins and outs, but I think they're going to make this stick because of careful preparation to make it stand up to legal challenge. They're going to get a legal challenge, but I think they're going to make the stick. Even the New York Times this week said, gosh, it looks like this one was not easy for a future Democrat to reverse with an executive order or a new EPA diktat. That's long and complicated. But the final thing to me is the media coverage. You expected it to be hysterical. I didn't expect it to be completely stupid. So ABC News, their evening news broadcast, I think yesterday, the day before, said Trump is depriving the EPA and the government of the ability to control the climate. As if our EPA could control the whole world's climate with a knob. I mean, how are they going to do this? It turns out, if you want to do just one fact about this, almost none of the interventions that have been made by us or other industrialized countries has had any effect on the decarbonization rate of our energy systems, which is going along for 200 years now at about 1.5% a year. Not because people want to be clean and green. We like efficiency, because when you're efficient, guess what? You make more money, right? And none of this is working. It's not making any difference. So this is, I mean, I'm enjoying this. I can go on a while. One last thing is the media coverage decided to not use certain prominent climatista voices like Michael Mann, the guy who sued National Review and is now on the hook for millions of dollars for lying to the court. Well, AP interviewed him and then put him up in an early version of the story and then took him out. Because even the media is coming around to realizing these people really were crazy. And they're still going to report wrongly and badly and report that every storm is is because of climate change.
Did they take him out with a hockey stick?
High stick, right? Yeah. I'll stop there because, as you know, I can bore you forever without even mentioning.
You already have, Steve. Don't put yourself
probably.
Down. So Lucretia has done her part, believe it or not, in popping the hysteria about climate change, because the reason we were all three of us in Austin last Friday was for a conference by the Civitas Institute about climate change. We had panelists who were part of this Department of Energy Special Task Force to evaluate the science behind climate change, behind the endangerment finding, which was very critical. And Lucretia chaired the third panel. And I actually didn't get a chance to ask you, Lucretia, what is your view of climate change and the science and the economics, the things that you heard and saw while you were moderating these panels? Because you were moderating, so you couldn't speak your mind, much like the moderator tonight.
Yeah. Well, the funny thing is that we had a kind of an outlier on our panel who I actually found really interesting, and everybody's going to get a kick. Well, actually, probably not. You're going to be upset about this, but in the midst of all the academies and the political science theory that she threw into her presentation, what she was talking about was the fact that the reason our homeowners insurance rates are skyrocketing is not because, the whatever happened in Tennessee or even California. It's because climate change risk is being from the models of climate change risk that can't even predict accurately what happened in the past are being built into by the actuaries into our homeowners insurance rates. And I don't know about you guys, but mine's gone up 300% in the 20 years I've owned this home, and I've never had a claim. And the biggest part of that is, I know housing prices go up, which means it's more expensive to replace a home if it burns down. I get all that, but it's still way beyond anything that you should expect. So I thought that was really interesting when her explanation of really sort of intricate details about how the politics inside of Congress work on that. But the main point was that climate change risks, which is a hoax of major proportions, in case you were wondering my thoughts, is actually, it has all sorts of really negative consequences beyond those stupid cars that shut down when you stop at a stoplight. The first time I took my car to the Audi dealer and they gave me a loaner, and I got to the stoplight and the car stalled, and I took it back. I said, "It stalled at the stoplight." And they thought I was, the dumb blonde, which I was, but I didn't know that this was 6, 8 years ago, something like that, maybe more.
Yeah.
But what a stupid thing. I remember being a kid, when I first would drive, you'd never turn your engine off, like if you're going to run inside the house, because it was bad for it. And I could never get myself to stop being upset when it would do that. One car we had a button, but you had to push it every time, so that's gone. I know.
Yeah, well,
It's my fault, David.
Well, at least in America, we have the option of turning that. I have 2 cars that have that start automatic stop thing, and I have it disabled because you can do that here. In Europe, I think it's mandatory because they're fuel Nazis.
Of course it is.
And everything else, right? Yeah, I think we should say though, Lucretia. I mean, the person you're talking about is Jessica Winkle from the University of North Carolina, and she's what do you say about her? She's not terribly political. She's a bit of an outlier in this sense. I think she would not say climate change is a hoax. I think she's probably a person who can be described as a lukewarmer. Yeah, well, okay. I mean, I've read a lot of it. But she's very careful about saying, wait a minute, something's off here. And look, her main point, which she came to at the end, and by the way, I think she hasn't been to many conferences quite like this one, although there haven't been many quite like this one.
Yes, that's what I heard.
I didn't even talk about the most fun one, but
well, just what, the legal one or the climate one at the beginning, right?
The one I was on was really boring. The best panel was the scientists
her main,
where they just wailed on each other and were calling each other like scientific felons and fraudsters.
Right.
It was wonderful.
Well,
I'm so glad
they just finished with Jessica
attacking each other. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Let me finish with Jessica in one sentence. Her culminating main point was scientific expertise has been damaged and it's their own fault, right? Because we've given it too many of these extravagant claims about climate change and the insurance companies have exploited this, right? And anyway, so no, she's very good, I think, and an interesting person to keep your eye on. But yeah, the science panel.
What? She made me sad.
Oh, yeah, I know all those
guys. Let me say this is a totally different thing, but I think you guys will appreciate it. My academic career inside of the regular thing is coming to an end. Happily, I turned in my paperwork to retire. I'm very happy about that.
Wow! So now she's Lucretia Emerita.
Well, they have to grant it first, but my point is that we had a long talk about, and she was asking me for advice about how you sort of deal with the intricacies of getting tenure and being, I mean, her course load to teach based on how much research she was expected to do was astounding. And I just remember feeling awful for her and thinking, God, academia is a terrible place to be these days. Anyway, sorry, that was a total tangent, but I know that our listeners sometimes like to hear a little bit about what's going on in academia, and it's awful.
Well, on that happy note, we are going to take another ad break. Coming back, I thought one more interesting topic for discussion had to do with a great conference I got to participate in this week at the American Enterprise Institute in Washington, which was a conference devoted to evaluating the legacy of Justice Scalia. This week was the 10th anniversary of his death. Can you believe it's been 10 years? And it was a lot of fun because it was, right now, there was a distance of time, asking people what they thought about his impact, his influence, why he had any. And so I got to tell some interesting personal stories about my relationship with him because the year I clerked for Justice Thomas, um, none of Justice Scalia's clerks played squash or tennis, and I did. I played both. So I ended up driving Justice Scalia to play squash or tennis twice a week. And I would talk to him during these times. And being a 25-year-old smartass recent graduate of law school, I would ask him and say all kinds of, now that I think about it, crazy, ridiculous things to him. Like, nobody agrees with you. Why do you write the sentence at all? And so on. So now I look back, can't believe I asked him things like this. But my main substance, and I'll tell some of these stories another time because I do feel like I got to know him pretty well. I should have written it up into a book, actually, all the things we talked about. But one thing that I tried to say on the panel is if the court strikes down independent agencies for good this year, right, as I think it will in this case about the FTC, the Slaughter case, overrules
right.
Humphrey's executor, it will be the ultimate vindication of Justice Scalia because in his very first year, he dissented alone in Morrison versus Olson and said that the independent counsel statute was unconstitutional. Now, today, that almost seems inevitable. His logic, right, that the executive powers grant, the Constitution's grant of executive power to the president must include the power to fire anybody who is responsible for executing federal law. It seems inevitable that the court would adopt that logic. It seems inevitable that all these independent agencies would eventually be brought to rein. But in 1987 and 1988, really Scalia's first real year on the court, he dissented alone. Chief Justice Rehnquist wrote the majority opinion saying that Congress could prevent the firing of even prosecutors. There was no scholarship. There was no histories. There were no arguments in defense of the unitary executive, if you want to call that. And it was such a lonely position to take at that time. And so one of the things I said, it really does show the force of ideas and the force of personality really can make a difference in politics. And Scalia's dissent to Morrison versus Olson eventually winning out, right, 30 years later almost, to in the
Certainly
end,
in the practical world.
yeah, to
Well,
eventually just to end the reign of independent agencies, I think is a remarkable story. But anyway, what I
yeah.
was going to ask
Well,
both of you is, what do you think of Justice Scalia's impact and influence 10 years later? Steve.
Well, you know, it was interesting. You probably remember this from 10 years ago, John, is when he died, you had a lot of people on the left, such as Linda Greenhouse, the other greenhouse effect. I always like to say, right? Linda Greenhouse, who's awful. Let's just stipulate that. I don't think there'd be any daylight between the three of us on that question. She said, you know, Scalia was really right about that independent counsel thing all those years ago. And that's when I thought, you know, the jig is up for these guys because the consequent logic of that points to where we have gotten to now. And of course, why did they say that, though? It was political, not really constitutional principle. It's because Ken Starr revealed that the independent counsel could be used against Democrats. Right. And so, I mean, look, that thing was set up to persecute Republicans after the Nixon years. And so good for Ken Starr for wrecking it the way he did. But the two other things to say is you left out, John, and we try to be brief about these things, but you go back to those years, you say Scalia was all alone, but you know, the Circuit Court of Appeals opinion that set the case up that sided with Ted Olson was spectacular and written by your other judge you clerked for, Lawrence Silberman, right? So you go back to those days, there's Lawrence Silberman and, you know, maybe my wife's judge, Danny Boggs, and Edith Jones a few years later, just a tiny handful. Now there's a lot of Lawrence Silbermans on the court. And on the to one degree or another, right, or not identical. And then finally, you'd say that, you know, Scalia did defend the Chevron doctrine for a while, as most Reaganites did, right? They thought that helped them to rationalize and make more sensible a bureaucratic regulation. But by degrees, everything you heard is that by 2016, he was starting to change his mind about that. So I think he'd be pretty happy and strongly in the majority on things like the West Virginia case with the major questions doctrine and so forth. So, yeah, his shadow lengthens every year. And I think there, you know, certain core philosophical differences he had with Thomas, such as on natural law and its application, I think those will be diminishing over time.
Lucretia Emerita.
John, I'm just if people who aren't people who are going to be listening to this are going to say John is getting a sour prune look on his face for my invocation of natural law. But
Don't worry, we're going to come back to that after the. It didn't go unnoticed. Don't think you're a sneaky bastard as you think you are.
It does make more sense to me, John, now why you're such a positivist if you spent all that time with Scalia, which is the only thing about him that I find objectionable. But it's one of those situations where the good is far outweighs the bad in this case, far outweighs the bad. But he was, in fact, a positivist about the law and did not believe that, for instance, we should turn to the Declaration of Independence or any of the theories of the Declaration of Independence in understanding the Constitution. That being said, 10 years after to the day, as actually today, I'm not going to speak ill of him at all. I remember as a young undergraduate, especially when I took 3 or 4 classes in constitutional law that we happened to have as an undergraduate, and just loved reading Scalia's opinions. You know, he brings in Orwell, and everybody else is just drone on, and it was just delightful reading Scalia's opinions, and especially his dissents. I do also remember you talked about what the liberals did when he died. I remember that the right was certain that, that there was some foul play involved in his death, and that went on for a very long time because he had been so influential and successful on the court, and because of the timing of his unfortunate death. We did not get Merrick Garland as our liberal friends hoped we would, and we've had that discussion many times. We got instead Mr. Gorsuch. Justice Gorsuch.
Thanks to the maneuvering of your favorite senator.
My favorite. And there's there you go. I mean, I think his brain actually has been addled by Trump derangement syndrome, because the SAVE Act is something he's been fighting for, those kinds of things his whole career, and all of a sudden, just because Trump wants it, he's not gonna support it. Yeah, never mind. Maybe I'm gonna have age limits after all, because these old people are just driving me crazy.
Let me raise one point that I made at the AEI conference to follow up on Steve's point, which is I did ask, some points that I don't think Scalia ever got to address, because I think he did die a little early, was he never did explain how much of a positivist he was. Did he actually think the Constitution could exist in a kind of free state, ungrounded in any pre-existing sense of right or wrong or morality? Was it really just a document meant to effectuate democracy, which is something, things he would say often? Was he really like Holmes, who famously said, if the American people voted to send themselves to hell, Holmes would, do his duty and help them on their way. And so there was this famous speech where Scalia went to the Vatican and spoke to an audience of canon lawyers. And I would have thought if there were ever any place he would yield an inch to natural law, natural rights, it would be there. But he would not. He did not yield an inch at all. So I think the answer to Steve's question is that he really was a pure positivist and would not accept any role for natural law, natural rights.
Can I ask a simple question?
Is that really a defect? I mean, does that, in a way, is that not maybe why Scalia's opinions are so, in a way, attractive to liberals too? I mean, he's one of the most cited justices by the 3 liberal justices now.
Yes,
because if you don't build a morality into your opinions that doesn't come from the Constitution itself, it makes them, maybe it gives them more staying power.
Well, I have an explanation, but Lucretia, you have a question, you said.
I just want to know why you would bother to support democracy with a constitution. Why would you choose democracy?
Well, look, I have it. That actually fits my explanation.
Yeah, I mean,
Go ahead.
that's the problem, is that ultimately, if you cannot give a defense of the natural law basis for people governing themselves in a democracy or a republic, if you cannot do that, then it's very easy ultimately to do what has happened, which is to deny that anybody but elites ought to rule. It's very easy to undermine the entire structure if you cannot build it on the right foundation. Sorry, go ahead, Steve.
Well,
Steve?
let me go back. Let me go back to that appearance at the Vatican you mentioned, John, because it's when John Paul II was still alive and in charge of things. He gave a talk too. I think he introduced Scalia. Now, if you took John Paul II's text, where he said very sensible things that could have been written by Lucretia about democracy and the natural law basis for it, and Scalia's text, and he took the names off them, you would have said, oh, this person who turned out to be John Paul II, he should be on the court. I mean, he's the one that's expressing the more deep American understanding, American founding understanding. And Scalia was, again, pure positivism, or not pure. But here's the point. If you then bring alongside Rehnquist's famous lecture he gave in 1977, where he quotes Holmes, right? Like you do, John, from time to time. Or, okay. He quotes Holmes. The problem, think about when Scalia goes to law school and Rehnquist goes to law school at Stanford, along with Sandra Day O'Connor in the 40s. And there's nobody talking about natural law. There's nobody talking about originalism of any kind. And, Holmes was the grand figure and then the most famous justice. I think, by the way, Scalia is displacing Holmes. I think what redeems Scalia and explains him is, in fact, at the end of the day, his Catholic faith. He would say privately, I believe in natural law. I don't believe judges can use that as an interpretive tool. But I think that he could not get away from his fundamental spiritual values. And I think that explains why he was so, and plus he's so smart, right?
And it explains John,
I think that
too.
explains it. What's that?
It explains John, too, because John believes all the right things, but has no basis in his explanation for why he believes them.
Well, I wasn't going to be
just through my
I wasn't gonna pick
superior
on John,
intellect and
right?
reasoning. What are you talking about?
But the point is, John, is that Thomas went to Yale Law School when in the 70s, was a classmate. Was he around the same time? I'm not sure the Clintons.
He's just a few years behind the Clintons. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. But the point is, now you have Gorsuch, who studied natural law with John Finnis at Oxford and so forth. We now have a generation of jurists coming up who have had a different legal education than Rehnquist and Scalia and Powell. Name all the others you can, right?
Yeah, you could.
And
That's a
that's why I
great
think
point. You could say that Scalia, Rehnquist, they are brought up at a time when the central problem is how do you find a principled basis for the court overturning Plessy in Brown versus Board of Education. Whereas for the following generation that you just mentioned, the younger justices, the central problem is Roe versus Wade, right? How do you allow a court to intervene in the abortion question? Well, I think we would have more time to talk about this in future podcasts, but I think we should take one more ad break, and then we'll come back for the wrap up.
So a good friend of ours, Steve's and mine, I guess John doesn't know him, Mickey Craig. I went to graduate school with Mickey Craig and actually wrote my first published article with Mickey Craig. It was a article about Rose Bird, who was Chief Justice of the California Supreme Court, and why before the what do they call them? Retention elections, right? And where she was not retained along with two other associate justices. And I always like to think it was because of the article that Mickey and I wrote. But Mickey was a longtime professor at Hillsdale and passed away, I guess, a couple days ago. So Mickey, rest in peace.
Yeah, not much older than us. A few years older than us.
Straussians never die; they just fade away.
Well, Mickey was, he was beloved. I mean, and I had lunch with him in November when I was at Hillsdale, but he didn't want to take me to lunch, and I had, a cheeseburger and a beer, and he had nothing because he was heading to the cardiologist that afternoon for more tests. So, in retrospect, so beloved person. But then there's another passing this week of someone I never met and I never even interacted with, but it's a guy named John Ekdahl, who was Charlie C.W. Cook's best friend in Florida, and Charlie's taking it very hard, and I don't blame him. Ekdahl had a very strong Twitter game, among other things, and one of his tweets from more than a decade ago caused a ruckus in the media, and it was very simple. He said, the Ford F-150 and GM's pickup truck equivalent, the best-selling car in America, by a lot. It's not even close. Question for the Washington Post, New York Times, CBS News. How many of you know a single person who drives a pickup truck? You would have thought in those newsrooms that somebody had thrown a dead skunk in the middle of there was an outrage to even bring up such an impertinent question to the sainted people in the news media. So talk about scoring a direct hit that exposed how out of touch the media is. And John was only 47, which is way too young. And anyway, he's getting a lot of deserved attention on Twitter and elsewhere this week. And Mickey, I may write something about Mickey. He was my housemate for a while, along with John Eastman. Me, John Eastman, Mickey Craig, in a house we rented from Peter Drucker, the famous management consultant guy.
You would have had to pay me to live there rather than the reverse.
Oh,
Did you
great
imagine?
stories.
Oh my God.
What we didn't talk about,
you've got some Babylon Bee headlines for us.
I do, but I have to bring up a subject because of it that we didn't talk about, which is the ongoing Nancy Guthrie saga. And it's very sad. She's an 84-year-old woman, blah, 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 blah. But oh my God.
Right near you, right?
Yes, I know exactly where she lives. It is, in fact, a very rural place. And we just got informed here where I am, about 75 miles from there, but it's across Arizona, that we can no longer have the lights on our house that shine up, or we have to turn them off after 10 o'clock at night because there are laws across Arizona against light pollution so that you can see the stars. Anyway, so that's part of the reason why it was, anyway. Here's my argument to John when he said I should be more interested in the story. I'm actually happy about the story because my life is, as a political scientist, such as that is always trying to stay ahead of all the major stories, and it leaves a whole area of news I don't even have to bother with. That's the only thing I like about that story. But I'm sorry, she's 84 years old. Do you know how many children are missing? Do you know how many, sorry.
Well, right.
I don't know who Savannah Guthrie is from Adam. I guess she's some twit on a morning news show, but who cares? Why is this such a big deal?
This is my one sentence.
That's one
summary.
interesting
It's a weird
question.
That's
one interesting question is, why do people care so much? They do.
Well, look, I've been saying my one sentence summary is this is the Lindbergh baby kidnapping of our age. And why was the Lindbergh baby kidnapping a big deal? Because Charles Lindbergh was famous. And so, Lucretia, you don't watch today's show. Well, okay, fine.
It's a baby, but not an 84-year-old woman.
But look, it would not have made any news 80 years ago if it hadn't been Charles Lindbergh's baby. And in this case, this would not make news except Savannah Guthrie is watched by 40 million people a day on the Today Show. You're not one of them, and I'm not either, but that's why. And that's the only reason why. It's the self-absorption of the media that's made it a story.
Doesn't it also appeal to people's fears about their elderly parents, and are they taking care of them well enough, and they're on their own? And it's just like there was, right, the idea that there were children being kidnapped, in open daylight, and actually child kidnappings have been at an all-time low when this happened, but it still caused a huge craze when this started happening in the 90s.
Fair enough.
So it's sort of, I think it's more not because the case itself is of individual merit, but it does express some things about what people are worried about. Because I think the TV shows are only showing it because the ratings are high for it.
Sure,
I think they're reactive, they're not causing the attention.
Your friend from Outnumbered, Harris Faulkner, actually grew up in that neighborhood, and she is obsessed by the story. I've turned it off every single day because I just can't listen anymore. Okay, but I only did that because I have a Babylon Bee, and I just want to make sure everybody knew what we were talking about. But before we get there, this one was sent to me by a listener who goes by the name Away. I would have found it anyway, but it's a good one. Alarming study shows average Somali high school senior in Minnesota committing fraud at just a 5th grade level.
Pretty good.
Oh, that is harsh.
So as we're hearing all of these stories about the fact that, as a matter of fact, universities are hiding their DEI, et cetera, they still have their damn land acknowledgements, et cetera. Wife refuses to return stolen land she took from husband's side of bed. Took you guys a second. And then we had the
I saw that.
yet another trans person shoot up a bunch of people. I'm sure it has nothing to do with those god awful drugs that they give them. Canadian reporter person announces police persons have identified gun person.
You already gave that joke away at the beginning of the show.
I know,
No,
but
right.
that was, I mean, the Babylon Bee does it better. So credit where credit's due. Haven't talked about the Olympics either. Don't care. Fraud suspicions arise as Somali team wins 734th gold medal at Winter Olympics. Then back to by SAFE Act, Democrats counter with Steal Act to ban voter ID. It's in capitals, Steal Act. Gruesome kidnapping, just the career boost crime reporter has been waiting for. Get it,
I don't get
guys?
that one.
Do you remember that great line from the Don Henley song, Dirty Laundry, the bubble-headed bleach blonde?
Dirty Laundry?
Yeah.
I
Bubble-headed
never
bleach
could
blonde that comes
I
on
never
at
liked
5.
Don
She'll tell
Henley.
you about the
I didn't either.
plane crash
I
with a
couldn't
gleam in
stand-
her
right.
eye. What?
But I don't
I'm
understand.
with Jeff Lebowski. I hated the Eagles. Yeah.
Although this is
God.
from the man who likes Air Supply and other such
Yeah, I
music.
know.
Oh no, that is
Yeah,
that
no,
is Clint
but-
Bolick. That is not me. Okay.
Anyway, that's a great song. I'm not a Don Henley fan, but that's a great song. Anyway, ICE
Last
leaves
headline.
Minneapolis.
Yeah.
Just 2 more. ICE leaves Minneapolis to focus on American cities. And finally, we didn't talk about this at halftime either. We were going to. NBC suffers bizarre technical glitch as entire halftime show broadcast in Spanish.
Right. I thought we were going to get all the way through this episode without a Bad Bunny reference, and I was afraid we weren't going to get in a Sydney Sweeney reference, but I just have, so now we're good.
Okay. Wait, before you go on, I have to tell you one thing. So I've been having trouble in teaching my class with Zoom. All these used to work perfectly. They've messed it up. But here's the crazy part. All of the directions inside of my learning management system where Zoom is are in Spanish. And when I change them back to English,
that couldn't happen to a better person. I got it.
and they come back in Spanish.
Right.
So it's a technical glitch.
I wish I could tell you I hacked your system and did that, because that would be beautiful.
Yeah.
Always drink your whiskey neat, buy more books. And Steve, what is the latest message from our AI rulers?
So I'm trying to change this up a little bit, but I couldn't resist, John. I asked them for what ChatGPT describes as the extremely niche genre of John Yoo natural law jokes.
Oh, I was really worried you were going to start talking about aerial pollution. So this
No.
is much
Oh
better.
God, no. I'm even I am not that mean to you. Okay, John Yoo's version of natural law. We hold these truths to be self-evident, unless the president thinks otherwise. Aquinas, natural law is rooted in human reason. John Yoo, natural law is rooted in executive discretion. Except that's actually kind of true in a certain way, but okay.
Yes, I agree.
Let's see, there's natural law says unjust laws are not true laws. John Yoo says, let's not rush to moral conclusions when memos are still being drafted. All right, that's
pretty clever by AI.
All right.
Give it points.
There's a bunch of these, and I'll skip over them. The founding fathers reacted John Yoo. James Madison reading expansive executive power theory. We wrote an entire constitution to avoid this exact email. Okay, there's more of these. They're fun. They're good one-liners, but
well, thanks for that,
I'll stop
Steve,
there.
and everyone. Thanks for joining us. Thank you to the live chat audience and all your contributions. I hope people can get a chance to read them if they view a recording of the podcast, because Steve and Lucretia have been wildly responding to the comments. I, of course, never read any comments, so it would be doubly hard for me to actually ever read live chat and participate.
Yeah.
But
Well, no,
this has been a lot of fun, I think, for both the hosts and the audience. So thank you very much for joining, and we'll see you next week.
Yeah.